Good morning, friends. It's Rachel here again, and we are picking up where we left off yesterday in the middle of Acts 27. And it was a bit of a cliffhanger, if you remember. Paul was a prisoner aboard a ship in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, and there's a huge storm, and everyone around him has lost hope. They're going wild, they're throwing out the cargo, they're throwing out the ship's rigging. And here is where we see Paul come into his own. We see him stand up as God's man for the hour. And he begins by gathering people and telling them, I told you so. In verse 21, he says, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel from God, to whom I belong and to whom I worship. And he said, do not be afraid, Paul, you must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God, that it will be exactly as I have been told." Interesting, isn't it, to think about how Paul compares to previous heroes of the faith that we've read about, perhaps in other parts of the Bible. Two that sprung to mind for me, firstly, in comparison, was Joseph. Joseph is a man that lived under the favour of God, so that even when he found himself in prison, God was with him and the favour of God was on him, and he became a leader even in that context. So it made me think of him. Secondly, by contrast, it made me think about Jonah, obviously another man on a boat in a storm, but by contrast with Paul. So whereas Paul is a means of grace, he's a means of salvation for the people around him, Jonah is the one who is disobedient. It says that the sea grew more and more tempestuous, and he said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will be quiet for you, for I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you." So whereas Jonah in the Old Testament was a threat to the boat because of his disobedience, Paul is a means of grace to this boat. And by sticking with him and not jumping ship like the sailors were attempting to, those that stayed with him, their lives were protected. Wouldn't it be good if we were the kind of people that when we face storms in life, that we brought grace and were a means of grace to those around us, rather than those that brought trouble? You would think that a shipwreck would be an exceptional, once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience, but we know this is at least the fourth time this has happened to Paul. The fourth time where he has found himself in this boat, pun intended. The second book of Corinthians, which was written a few years before this, Paul describes his adventures and difficulties that he's already faced, and he talks about being beaten by rods, being stoned, being shipwrecked, being adrift at sea night and day. He's had danger from robbers and people that know him and people that don't. He's talked about danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, but he says that it is worth it, and that he boasts in his weakness, so that Christ's strength may be seen in him. And here we find him prepared, don't we? Prepared to face the storm once again, because he knows that God is with him and he knows that it's worth it. So here we find Paul, a prisoner on a ship in a tempest, in the dark, surrounded by 276 people who have lost all hope. And what does he do? He breaks bread and he gives thanks to God. Isn't that amazing? The chapter finishes by telling us, and so it was that all were brought safely to land. My prayer for us this morning is that we would be the kind of people that are a means of grace in a time of crisis, that we would be those that know to look to Jesus, to look to the cross and what he's done for us, and to give thanks to God, even in the darkest and most difficult situations. I hope that encourages you, and I hope that you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.